continuing along, we're going to look at composition of functions when we don't have x's in them anymore. We'll have a number that we're plugging in. And this will be nicer, actually, because we should be getting a number out if we do them correctly. So let's take a look. On this next set of examples, we have f of x equals x squared plus 3 and g of x equals 2x minus 1. And what we're going to start out with is f of g of 1. So let's replace the notation with our parentheses instead of the little circle. So now we've got f of g of 1. So let's start out with the inside part. Let's start out with g of 1. The question is, what does g of 1 actually mean? G of 1 means I'm supposed to go up to g and plug in a 1 wherever there's an x. So that would be 2 times 1 minus 1. Well, you do the 2 times 1 first, which is 2, minus the 1 will give you 1. So what that means is that this entire g of 1, when you plug in 1, you get out a 1. Now, that won't always happen. That's just what happened here. So we got out a 1. Notice the rest of this has not been done. So we still have the parentheses around that, and we still have the f out in front. Now the question is, what am I supposed to do with this? Now I've got f of 1, which means I'm supposed to plug a 1 into our function f, wherever there's an x. So let's see what happens when we do that. Well, then I'll have 1 plugged in for the first x, which remember that the first x, according to this, is squared, plus a 3 times the next x is supposed to be also a 1. Well, let's see what happens with that. We'll do our order of operations, which is the 1 squared, which is 1 first. Then you can do the 3 times 1, which is 3. And then you'll get the 1 plus 3, which is equal to 4. And that's going to be our final answer here. Now let's try another example. Let's look at g of f of negative 2. We'll use the same exact functions. We'll switch the notation first and use parentheses instead, which will turn this into g of f of negative 2, but this time with parentheses. We'll start with the inside part, which is f of negative 2. Well, f of negative 2 is telling us to go up to our function f and plug in a negative 2 wherever there's an x. So let's try that. Well, on that function, we've got a negative 2, or an x that's squared. We're plugging in negative 2, plus we've got a 3 times negative 2. Well, we have to follow order of operations and do our exponents first. So negative 2 squared is going to give us a positive 4, plus then we can go ahead and do our 3 times negative 2, which is negative 6. And then we can do our final step, which is our addition, which is that 4 plus negative 6 is negative 2. Again, we got something unique, is that when you plug in negative 2, we also got out the same answer, negative 2. So that means f of negative 2 is negative 2. That is not entirely normal, but that's what happened here. That's kind of our side work. We still have to take whatever we got there, and we still haven't dealt with g yet, and we have to take that and plug that into g. So the question is, what does function g tell us to do? Well, function g looks like 2x minus 1, and we're replacing the x with a negative 2. Well, that gives us 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4. Minus 1 now is going to give us negative 5. And that will be our final answer for this one. But we're done. Notice these are actually easier because we have actual tangible numbers we can plug in. That's kind of nice. As a quick reminder, because we're dealing with the same functions continually, as a reminder, our function f of x was x squared plus 3x, and our g of x was 2x minus 1. So on this one, we're looking for f of g of -1. So let's switch out the notation here to start and use the parentheses notation, which will have us rewriting this as f of g of -1, but with parentheses only. And we'll start on the inside first. Let's start out with what is g of -1. So I can go off to the side and figure out what g of -1 is first. Well, g of -1 means to take our function g, which is 2x minus 1, and plug in a -1 wherever there's an x. So that'll be 2 times -1 minus 1. Well, 2 times -1 is -2, minus 1 is -3. So what this means is that g of -1 is -3. So I can replace this entire g of -1 with a -3. I still haven't dealt with the f that was out in front, so I'm still going to need to do that, which means I now need to take our -3 we just got out and plug it back into f, wherever there's an x. Well, let's look at our f function above. Well, our f function above, as a reminder, is x squared, which means we'll do -3 squared plus 3 times x, and again, x is -3. And let's see how this works. Well, first of all, we'll have to do exponents first, which is the -3 squared is going to give us a +9. And then plus, we've also got a 3 times a -3, which will give us a -9. So now we've got a +9 plus a -9, which they cancel out. They don't disappear. We still have 0. So we'll get our final answer